Hello, my most amazing artists. For this week's lesson, we are going to be focusing on how to create a collagraph. If you don't know what that is, a collagraph is when you take a surface, in our case we'll be using cardboard for our surface, and you add materials to that surface to make it raised. It will also be adding texture to our surface, and ultimately that textured surface is what we'll be using to create a print and a rubbing. So today's video is going to be the first part of a two-part lesson. For the first part of this lesson, creating the collagraph, you are going to need some cereal boxes or snack boxes, a type of cardboard that is easily cut with scissors. You'll need scissors and some glue. If anything I mentioned you don't have, don't worry. You can always alter these lessons to meet your needs to create a masterpiece. So if you don't have glue, maybe tape will work, maybe a glue stick will work. Be creative. Now before we begin, let's review our elements of art. Line, shape, color, value, texture, and space. We will be focusing on the elements of shape and texture to create our collagraphs today. So gather up your supplies and materials, and let's talk about how we can begin building our collagraphs. Okay, so I have all my supplies here, and if you didn't figure this out from the video's title, we are going to be making robot collagraphs using the geometric shapes that we talked about in last week's lesson. Now, of course, a collagraph does not have to be a robot. If you liked this project and you want to try it again, you can make it a different subject the next time. So I have some old cereal boxes and snack boxes here that I have cut or pulled apart to make them flat. If you have not done this yet, you need to do that first. So you can find an edge on your cereal box or snack box and take your scissors and cut it, or you can kind of rip it to make it a flat surface to work with. In this case, I've got a back of a cereal box here that I cut, and then I cut it in half to have two pieces. So if you don't have a lot of cardboard at home, this is how you can stretch it to make it last longer. So now one of my pieces can become the surface on which I'm going to build my collagraph on and put the texture on, and the other piece can be cut up into smaller pieces for my robot's body. But I wanted to have a surface that was a little bit bigger to work on. So I ended up taking the front side of that cereal box, cutting it out, and I'm going to use that as my building surface, and these pieces are going to become the pieces I cut smaller for my robot's body. Okay, so this is my surface that I'm going to be building on top of. I'm not going to use this right now because I'm going to focus on cutting out all of my geometric shapes, so I'm going to take my surface piece and put it to the side. And I'm going to pull out my other pieces of cardboard that I'm going to use to start cutting out some geometric shapes. So I'm going to grab my scissors. Now it's really important during this step that you're practicing scissor safety. So when I'm cutting, my scissors are always pointed away from my body, and I'm cutting slowly, giving my hand a really good workout. Now remember, I don't need to take my scissors and turn it in towards myself if I have to make a corner. That just is going to hurt my wrist. So instead I'm going to take my helper hand, don't let him be lazy, and he can turn my materials for me so that my scissors can keep going straight ahead and they don't have to turn in. So my helper hand turns the cardboard. So while I'm cutting, I'm not thinking too much about what kind of shapes I'm making or what kind of geometric shapes I'm making. I'm just cutting some easy geometric shapes like squares and rectangles and triangles, and I'm trying to cut them out in different sizes. So I'm going to have some larger sizes, some medium pieces, and some small pieces, and I'm going to try to keep them organized by size. Now, don't forget about circles and ovals and semicircles. Those are geometric shapes too. They're just a little bit more tricky to cut out than shapes that have straight edges. So when I cut a circle, I have to slow my scissors down, and as I'm cutting, my helper hand is going to turn the cardboard for me so that my scissors don't have to move. Now you could draw out your shapes first, but it's kind of fun to just go for it. It's not a perfect circle, but it works out pretty good. Let's try a semicircle. I have a flat edge on that semicircle, and then it has a rounded top. So I can make maybe these cool scraps I can use for something later. I'm going to put those over here. So I'm going to continue cutting out different types of shapes, and I want you to focus on making those small, medium, and large shapes. Okay, so I have cut out a ton of geometric shapes in different sizes, and I've organized them by what size they are, small, medium, and large, so I can easily pull out different shapes that I'm thinking about. One of the things you need to think about while building your robot's body is your composition. And the composition is how you are placing things on your artwork. If I just start taking random shapes and gluing them down wherever, I can't go back to change things around if I change my mind. So you want to be thinking about laying things out and finding your composition you like before you start to glue down. So what I'm going to do to build my robot's body is I'm just going to lay things out a bit so I can start to think about what I want my robot to look like. And I can always change my mind because I haven't glued anything yet. So I can experiment first with maybe the bigger pieces to figure out the head and the body, and see if I can find anything that I would really like for that. Maybe this would be a cool shaped head. I have like a shorter body. I think I like that for the body, a little square. And it definitely needs a neck. I'm going to pull one of my small pieces and kind of connect my head to my body. I kind of want my head to like tilt a little bit, like he's looking at me like a sad puppy. Yeah, I like that. Legs, I'm going to pull from this pile. These two little rectangle legs might be nice. They're a little bit long, so I'm going to trim them and make them just a little bit shorter so I can fit some feet down there. There we go. Let's see, what do I got for feet here? Definitely squares. I don't want to start stacking anything on top quite yet. I just want to get the body base laid out the way I like it so that I can glue it down first before I start to stack any pieces onto my robot's body. So I think that looks pretty good. I kind of like that if that's my main body right now. I've got all my parts: a head, neck, arms, legs, feet, hands. I haven't quite decided what I want to do about those antennas, but I can think about that for a little bit. So when you have your body composition laid out the way you like it, then we can start to glue things down. So I'm going to move these off. I'm not sure about those yet. But when we're starting to glue, you want to make sure you're getting all of your pieces glued. So I like to start from the top and glue each piece as I go from the top down so I don't miss anything. I'm going to open up my glue bottle, take off the top because I know it's probably clogged. I'm going to be flipping over my pieces and putting glue on the colored sides. You only need to put a little bit of glue around the edge. You do not need to put a whole bunch of glue in the middle. A little bit around the edge is perfect. Give it a little massage. I know I've got enough because it's seeping through. Some of these I might only need a little bit of a line or a little dot because they're kind of smaller, but those big pieces, a line around the outside edge should be just enough. Now when you're gluing things, they might shift a little bit. That's because the glue is still wet and it needs something called grab time. So just because it's shifting doesn't mean that you need to put more glue on it to make it stop shifting. It just needs a little bit of time for the glue to grab onto the surface you're gluing it to and dry a little bit so it doesn't move as much. So you need to give glue a little bit of grab time and just be patient with it. So I'm going to continue gluing down the rest of these pieces. I've finished gluing down all of my basic pieces for my robot's body, and my glue isn't quite dry yet, but it has had enough grab time where I think I can start to experiment with the details. So I'm going to be using all of my smaller pieces here and arranging them on top of my robot's body, or building upwards, to create details like the dials, buttons, ridging on the legs, eyes, face. So we're going to kind of do that same process where we're laying out the pieces and arranging them and experimenting with different designs until we find some things that we like. We're not gluing anything down yet because you can't change it if you change your mind. Then you can't move it around. It's already glued. So I like to kind of experiment a little bit with how things are going to look. This might be kind of fun, little dial. Yeah. And then I want you to be thinking about your robot's face. What kind of expression will your robot have? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to experiment with arranging my composition with details. The more details I add on, the more texture I'll have, which will look really cool in our next phase of this lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out my arrangement right now, and you should too. Okay, so I think I've finished figuring out what I wanted for my details on my robot. I've built up a lot of texture. I've got dials, buttons, and doodads, texture on the arms to kind of show how they bend. I have texture on the mouth. I even have a pupil in my eye. I'm feeling really good about my composition and all my details. So now I can start to glue. And remember, we are going to kind of start from the top up, so that we don't miss any pieces. If you feel like you did miss pieces, you can kind of lift up your piece and move it around to see if anything shifts. But I'm going to start by gluing down, or I'm going to finish by gluing down all of my little details that I've built on top of my robot's body. And unlike those big pieces, these little doodad guys are probably only going to need a little bit of glue. Maybe just even a dot. Let's press them down because they're not going to need a whole bunch. Like itsy bitsy teeny weeny little dots of glue. Okay, so all of my pieces are now glued down on my Collagraph. And I think my robot looks pretty friendly. He's waving at everybody, and I love it. Congratulations! You just made a Collagraph robot. I hope you had as much fun making this as I did. I know I had so much fun that I took my leftover scraps and I made a second Collagraph of something completely different. And I'll be posting a video of me making that on my channel later on if you want to go check it out. Now you can make another Collagraph too if you want. The cool thing about this is that you can make a Collagraph about whatever subject you want to. Now remember, before you can move on to part 2 of this lesson, your robot Collagraph has to be completely dry. If he's not dry, you're going to run into some problems in the next steps. So put him somewhere nice and safe. Let him dry, and when he is all good and ready to go, you can meet me over in part 2 of this lesson. I'll see you then. Goodbye, my most amazing artists.